All right, Mr. Sigmund Bloom. I forgot to have you check your audio levels. Look at this behind
I
the
did.
scenes
I checked.
conversation. You
I
checked?
checked.
Look at
76. It
you.
was 56. Now it's 76.
Look at you,
Spirit of
podcast
76.
professional. That's
Well,
right.
professional something.
Freedom. Here we go.
You got a team, here's a word to the wise. You want to dominate your league? Go to football, guys.
Football, I'm living in a fantasy. Football, got everybody mad at me. Football, cause every game I had to win. Football, I gotta be a champion. Football, I'm living in a fantasy.
NFL teams love Jayden Daniels, and I'm sure after his pro day yesterday, they love him even more, Bloom. And that's why when I was at the NFL owners meetings, there was kind of some jokes floating around from luminaries of like, it's Caleb and then it's Jayden, okay? The suggestion, like it could be JJ. Well, unless someone just crushes Adam Peters with a haul, I don't think that's going to happen. It seems like Jayden Daniels is almost locked in as that number 2 overall pick.
It seems like it, certainly. And I think that we're not going to get confirmation until maybe the day of the draft. Maybe we could get it before that because Washington, with Chicago locked into Caleb Williams, technically is the number 1 pick at this point. I mean, not technically, but figuratively is the number 1 pick at this point. But Cease, I think that we're into that lying season where the water has been muddied. What you do see from Jayden Daniels, the running ability is something that we had Antonio Pierce talk about. And I believe what he was actually asked was, what gives you the most trouble? Not what do you want in a quarterback. I suppose you could tie that in a knot and make that out of it. But that does seem to be something that in theory could be a great equalizer. But over here we have Justin Fields. Now, Jayden Daniels has looked more comfortable as a passer than Fields ever looked at Ohio State. I mean, I wasn't anti-Fields after watching him at Ohio State, but I did feel like he's not comfortable attacking as a passer. Jayden Daniels, at least in the pocket, is comfortable attacking as a passer. And then on the other side, we're going to watch this play out because how Jayden Daniels' career plays out, sack to pressure ratio is something that people are looking at, and everybody in the Jayden Daniels zone were busts. So how's that going to translate? How much is he being helped by a great offensive line and great wide receivers? On the other hand, it's clear, and also he's a 5th-year senior, so he's had more time to develop. Are there draft quarterbacks that if they had that much time to develop and had that kind of surroundings would have popped the way he did? So that's what's fun is we're going to learn all this stuff wherever he plays, but we still have to also keep in mind that where he lands could be part of the story. Cliff Kingsbury in Washington, and Anthony Lynn and what he might do to make a strong running game. Is that going to help him flourish? Or potentially could we look back at Justin Fields' situation and say, well, you put Daniels in this situation and it's going to be impossible for him to succeed. So we're watching these careers play out and we're learning about what it means as we watch them play out next to each other.
Yeah, and it's all about fit. I mean, I've said it a zillion times. You've said it a zillion times. Like, Jayden Daniels has to go somewhere where someone's going to nurture and get that nourishment from his game, but he had 90 explosive plays in 1 year at LSU. Joe Burrow, with 2 more games, had 78 explosive plays. And a lot of those explosive plays for Jayden Daniels were as a passer. So, yes, comfort level. I believe if you're an NFL team and if you are talking yourself out of Jayden Daniels because of Justin Fields, you're probably not going to be with your NFL team for much longer. So, make the right decision and make sure you have the right. And what are we in here? 4 minutes in? Joe, I'm sorry, but make sure you have the right God blessed America fit. Because if you don't have the right fit, go to 2018. Did they mess up with Baker? Yes. Baker can win games. Oh, Josh and Lamar. The best one's Lamar. And Lamar was the last one. Rosen would likely always have been a bust, my opinion. And even though he might have been book smart, there were Dolphins people that told me, because I asked him, I was like, why isn't Josh getting a chance? He's like, he's really dumb. But okay, so maybe Rosen out of the question. But Darnold, how would Darnold have looked differently? So we go back through the bus. Chicago screwed Justin Fields because they had no idea what to do with him and nurture him and to create the comfort for him as a passer.
And that's why I think what we see from Justin Fields in Pittsburgh this year, Cease, will affect conversations about this archetype of quarterback going forward. Because if it is fit and it is the surroundings allowing a quarterback to grow, then he should be a better quarterback with Pittsburgh and above the line of tolerable. Because the Steelers, with their defense, with their running game, hopefully, will allow Justin Fields to play in a way that his tendency to hold the ball for too long, right? He's more of a see it, throw it passer than an anticipation passer. Then that won't matter as much. In fact, you can do a lot of things. I'm remembering Brian Greasy. I'm remembering Jake Plummer, where Chris Sims, where you basically put a quarterback as a passer in such a rigid flow chart kind of decision making that once they exhaust that, then they can take off and run, and it's okay. And they aren't in that in-between place where Justin Fields seemed to be so many times in Chicago when he was taking sacks and fumbling and causing those negative plays. He won't be in a position to have that happen in Pittsburgh, and he'll probably be in an environment, it sounds like, if you believe the reports, an environment he wants to be in. So we should see that. And if Justin Fields looks good, then it is a fit. But then, since we come back to, you mentioned Sam Darnold, can a quarterback be skewed by fit at the beginning of their career and still overcome that? And there's a good sign maybe that Baker Mayfield is showing us. I don't know if Baker Mayfield was a fit guy, though. I think Baker Mayfield might have been just a maturity guy, that maybe he's mature now. So as this all floats around, I think we spell it all out. It's hard to evaluate quarterbacks. It's hard to predict what's going to happen with quarterbacks, and you need the organization and player combination. It's not strictly based on the player or on the organization. And the last thing I'll add to this is something we talked about last year. Do the thought experiment. If CJ Stroud goes to Carolina, what's the conversation about there? If Bryce Young goes to Houston, sometimes the player is so strong that they're going to succeed or fail no matter where they end up. Sometimes it matters. And for these 4 in this class, it could be all 4 that it matters.
Yeah, and I'll throw in 5 because Bo Nix is a first-round talented quarterback who, and that's where I get, grind my gears.
Yeah.
Where it's like, could the Broncos move back to the second round and get Bo Nix? Bo Nix should not be there. If you're evaluating things properly based on his tools, maybe you don't like his attitude. Like, I actually like his attitude. So we're going to see how this all plays out. Mark says a month away. It is a month from today.
It is a month away. Yeah. And wow. on Nick Cease, 2 of the most respected. I mean, if we were going to have a conversation about who knows ball, if we're going to do some sort of list podcast,
we should.
Who knows ball, right?
Right.
Among writers, among folks who came up as writers, maybe number 1, certainly on the very short list, Doug Farrar.
Oh,
right?
yes, 1,000%.
And if we're talking about media figures that predated the internet, probably number 1, like the knowest, ballest guy you could ever have seen on ESPN was Greg Cosell. Yeah,
1,000%. Yes.
And they had a conversation with Bo Nix this week, where Doug Farrar was just floored. He was just blown away. He said he's a football supercomputer. Now how important is that in success? And that's what makes the draft so fascinating, because for one guy you can have a supercomputer, but some other factor overcomes it, right? For other guys, it's a different factor that is the key to their success or the key to their failure. You mentioned Josh Rosen, the last thing, and I don't think this really implicates anybody in this class, but I think with Josh Rosen and Robert Griffin III, there was murmurs about, well, how much do these guys love football? Because they both said, I could also do other stuff, right?
Yeah, the NFL doesn't like that.
Right? Well, and it's important because there were lots of conversations with Josh Rosen around, like, well, he could do this, he could do that. Robert Griffin III too. I might want to run for president. I remember when he was at Baylor, he would say things like that. And I know we just had Jason Kelce retire. In the same draft that Jason Kelce went to the Eagles, they took Danny Watkins. And Watkins, I think, was he ended up being like a firefighter, I want to say.
Wasn't he a firefighter when he came in?
Right.
It's Canadian, right?
Right. So, the love of football, and we can say that's old school thought, but when we look for patterns in the busts, it's there. It's there.
Yeah, it is there. This one comes in, Jonathan. How about his elbow? We won't know. Honestly, we won't know. It's like the Michael Penix Jr. thing where it's like his medicals at the combine were, I think it was outstanding was the word.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, we won't know, we won't know. And the frame, I believe, and as someone who watches frames, and I should bring this up, Bloom, because Doug's number one quarterback this year is Jayden Daniels. We had a kumbaya moment at the combine where we were like bro hugging, and he's from Lakewood up to no good. So even though Doug's lived in Seattle for 20 plus years, he's from Colorado. He was like, I think not, he had to correct me because I was like, you're the first member of the Queensryche fan club. He's like, no. I was like member number 3 or something. So anyway, so Doug and I are simpatico on a lot of things outside of football. So we were like bro hugging, talking about Jayden, who he's watched film with Jayden. The frame does come up, right?
Yeah.
I talked about sitting next to Michael Penix at the Senior Bowl and how his legs are skinnier than mine, and I'm skinny now. Let me finish. So like that's a concern. I have talked to I'm not going to say who, but let's just say the top of a couple of NFL teams, and they've asked me about Penix. In my opinion, I've shared some information, but like with Daniels, the frame, it's maybe a little bit less of a concern, Bloom, and maybe I should be wrong about that. But here's where my concern with Jayden is. And again, he's my number one quarterback. My concern is I'll quote Yoda this morning. You are reckless. Like
exactly.
He's so wild. Like he thinks he's built like Josh Allen or Cam Newton, and he's not built like that. So I hope, this is a bad thing to hope, but I'm hoping that in the NFL he gets one of those welcome to the NFL moments that doesn't hurt him or doesn't injure him, right? So like somebody smashes into him and it's like, welcome to the NFL, kid, and he figures out like, oh, I can't do that anymore. Because at LSU, he's like, I'm running over guys. Yeah. It's like, you're not running over anybody.
Yeah, Wile E. Coyote. I think it was Mina Kimes and Doug Farrar both had Wile E. Coyote in their description. And you're absolutely right. And this is a great point where we can abstract out and talk about the draft and talk about scouting profiles and talk about outcomes for players. Because if Jayden Daniels had a different playing style, his frame wouldn't matter as much. Right? You can't just look at traits in a vacuum. You have to look at traits in the context of how the players deploy, summon up what they have on a football field to make good things happen for themselves and their team. And because he's reckless, now the frame matters a lot more. And I think that you could look at this Jayden Daniels profile, okay, and see if he is a hit, if he's the next Lamar Jackson, then we would say we should have seen it coming. Of course, he's the next Lamar Jackson, or maybe he can add some wrinkles as a passer that Lamar Jackson doesn't. If he busts, then we can say again, it's the surroundings, it's that he had longer in college to develop, it's the frame, it's the pressure to sack ratio. And we can tell a story, and we should always be telling a story of how a player failed, why they failed, which in the NFLs taboo. Why do we not have it? We have lots of stories about why players hit. We don't have nearly as many as why they failed, because the subject is taboo. But it shows you that it's kind of like enlightenment. Before enlightenment, rivers are rivers and mountains are mountains. While you're being enlightened, they're no longer rivers and mountains. And then once you're enlightened, they're rivers and mountains again. Once you get to know these players, Cease, they can hit. They can be a bust. And you can stare at it and say, well, we'll see what happens. That's what we like doing together. But pretending that we can predict this stuff correctly, and it shows how smart we are about football, it's an illusion. It's a sham.
The NFL in its hubris is like, it's not us. We don't do anything wrong with quarterback development in a league where 60 quarterback plays and 50 of them sucked. Like, and I think I'm reducing my number. I always used to say 12 teams have it figured out. It might just be 10. Like, there's not many real good quarterbacks, and that comes from development. I didn't get a chance to ask Sean, although I will soon, Bloom. I want to chop it up with him about like a developmental league for quarterbacks, like at least a 7-on-7 league. Let receivers run routes, let corners cover. Sorry, offensive line, you get screwed. But we don't have any more Jake Delhommes. We don't have any more Brad Johnsons. We don't have any more Kurt Warners. By the way, Kurt Warner loves Bo Nix as well. And I'll go back to Bo Nix quickly because we're talking about some luminaries here because we brought up Doug Farrar. Shout out Doug. And then shout out Mike Tanier. Everyone subscribe to the Substack. And when it comes to my email inbox, I am so flippin' happy, right? Like I got one this morning. I haven't read it yet. It's about the Steelers, boom. But like anytime I see my 10 years written anything, something on a dinner napkin, I would be excited because the dude is amazing and is awesome. So he had some numbers he'd brought up about yards per attempt under pressure. Bo Nix is at like 9.6.
Right.
Caleb Williams is at 3.6. Now, USC's offensive line sucked, and Caleb's is generational talent. Like, Caleb is the number one pick. There's no question there. But when we compare it to a Spencer Rattler, who was like 3.2, I still get some like, what about Rattler in the fifth? Like, or what about Rattler in the second? I almost gag when I hear that. And like, he's all right, but let's not go crazy here. But back to Nix being that supercomputer, and yeah, it's the system. What do coaches enjoy?
Exactly.
Guys that run, sorry, Joe, again, they run their flipping system.
Yeah. Well, and again, looming over this conversation, this is why I love the off season. We get to have conversations like this.
Stretch it out, baby.
We don't have to talk about, but all of these big picture conversations. I repeat myself a lot these days. I love the draft. It's my first love in overthinking the NFL. I said this with Matt Harmon yesterday on the couch, because every football topic and conversation comes up in the draft. You can use the draft as an off-ramp to talk about any football theory topic you want. And I think that a player that is looming over this, as we're talking about quarterback development, right? We're talking about the quarterbacks in this draft, but really the big picture conversation is about quarterback development. We are in a situation now, Cecil. You brought out Kurt Warner. That's a good name. You brought up Jake Delhomme, Brad Johnson. We do have one of those guys, Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. Mr. Irrelevant is going to get like $50 million a year very soon. Now, what's going to be funny about that is if it's just the system, then I suppose you should trade Brock Purdy for 2 first-round picks and something else because you can cultivate another quarterback. But I think fit and system matters, and it's why, even though we joke about it, so many head coach hires were guys that Sean McVay knew or guys that Kyle Shanahan knew. And we're going to see if more offensive coordinators and organizations can make that bridge, because I don't think that if Brock Purdy had gone to Cecil, how many teams would we even be talking about Brock Purdy right now if he had 25 teams, 28 teams, where if he had just been drafted by a different team, he would be, whatever, Jake Browning.
He wouldn't be playing.
Yeah.
When I was at the Shrine game in Vegas and I talked to him for an hour, I thought I was going to buy insurance from him.
Right. Well, I think it was either Mike Tenier. It was either Mike Tenier, who's the best pure writer among us.
Yes.
Mike. It was either Mike Tenier or Doug Farrar that said he's a future Houston Texans offensive coordinator. That was like the scouting report. Future, which in hindsight means they picked up on something very real about the story of his success too, because it is Kyle Shanahan with that joystick, and basically like he's controlling the quarterback to optimize the value in his play designs. But let's not forget offensive line, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, right? George Kittle, now Christian McCaffrey. What if Brock Purdy had been drafted by the Bears? I think that you can't tease all these things apart. Only in hindsight can we make sense out of it. But certainly when we have that new information about where a player lands organizationally, it gives us a picture instead of just floating out in space like we are right now.
I just love reminding people that he thought he was done. He was enjoying the Shrine game as his last moment of playing football. And it was in the Super Bowl 2 years later.
Yeah.
So I was
going to make generational
video.
wealth. He's going to make like GDP of a small island in the Caribbean wealth.
I was watching a quantum physics video, Bloom. So as a writer, I'm fascinated by multiple things. And so there's the theory, some may not think it's a theory, that everything is possible all at one moment. All realities exist at the same time. So you go from everything is possible, right? Didn't Kevin Garnett say that? Anything is possible. But when you use action,
right?
And again, the Holy Trinity is thoughts, emotions, and actions. So when you take action to make steps towards what you want, it creates from the possible to now the probable, and you have choices in front of you of, what choice are you going to decide? So when everything's happening all at once, right? Every possibility is playing out right now at the exact same time, but your choices, your action have made what you have in front of you what's probable now. So better choices, better realities, better possibilities, or actually probabilities through actionability. So Brock Purdy has done that. He's Mr. Irrelevant to now.
Very relevant.
Down, where's Brock Purdy live? Right near the beach, boy.
Yeah. And I'm so glad, quantum physics is a fun topic and one that I think folks should try to, like watch A Brief History of Time, Stephen Hawking, Errol Morris, and watch every Errol Morris documentary. But when you get into quantum physics, it implicates everything. I mean, we're talking about the nature of the thing that we are in here, learning about it. And what's wild about it is that some of the things in quantum physics lines up with stuff from like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, like 7,000 years ago, whenever, whatever. So these are things like the secrets of the universe aren't secret, nothing new under the sun. We always think we're the peak of human knowledge and advancement and evolution. It's not true. In fact, our unwillingness to look back and respect and wisdom gained in the past by our ancestors is actually making us go backwards. But that's for a different topic. But science, I mean, the thing about quantum physics is it is science. It's not woo-woo poetry. Okay, it's science. And I believe they've been really able to isolate in Einstein, this starts with Einstein, that the observer changes the reality.
No, it's the slit experiment.
It's
when
not
they shot
yeah.
the particles at the slit and they
Right.
observed it, it lined up exactly like the
Right.
slits were. And
Right.
when they didn't observe it, the particles would land in random patterns.
Right. So science shows us like that the observer changes the reality being observed. It's not magical thinking. And then what you add on top of that is that consciousness may well be the thing that brings the universe into existence, because without consciousness, without an observer, everything remains a cloud of probabilities. That's really what things are in their nature, a cloud of probabilities, and the observer brings it down into this one. And that's why we like the draft, because we learn about all of these different realities. And like I said to Matt Harmon, when we start talking about alternate realities, that's now we're talking. And the draft is where all kinds of alternate realities pop in and out of existence without us even knowing about it.
We almost got too crunchy there for a second.
No, you take it crunchy and then you come all the way back to like filet mignon.
This isn't the one you got me from India, but I had a friend to get me my Ganesh here right at my desk. So the remover of obstacles.
That's why we have Ganesh right over here over our front door. And we have Ganesh right where we walk up the stairs, the remover of obstacles. Absolutely. I again, look back to India, look back to Egypt, look back to these places, because they knew some things that are still valuable today.
Yes, for quarterbacks.
Right. Well, hey, we're getting there. Since we're in off the rails time for our 20-minute live audible, and I know you're on a hard schedule, but I do encourage folks to look into Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who's like the highest paid pitcher ever from Japan, signed to this massive deal before he ever even pitched. He has training techniques that have mystified baseball. They've never seen anything like it before. And what's great about the Dodgers organization is that they're all asking him through interpreters, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? And Mookie Betts, who's one of the best players in the game, said he picked up some stuff and they asked him, well, what are you doing? He said, well, I don't understand it, so I can't really tell you what I'm doing, but I saw this guy and I'm like, I want to learn what he's doing. So there's still more to learn, but again, maybe by looking backwards, not by innovating.
He's Sigmund Bloom. I'm Cecil Lammey. We are the Audible, everyone. Check out footballguys.com, our free rookie draft guide available now, footballguys.com. And we appreciate you all for helping out our YouTube channel. Like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you never miss a vid. We appreciate that. He's Sig. I'm Cease. Did I say follow us on Twitter? Yeah, you know the drill. There you go. I'll point. You know the drill. Everyone, thanks for watching. Stay tuned. And would you please stay frosty.